I feel like there's two type of dandies. There's the ascot dandy, and there's the sweatsuit dandy.
Okay.
Well, no, this is a great point. No. This is a great. This is a great point. No. He's not being disrespectful.
Yeah,
it's a great point because that's what hip hop ushered in.
Yeah.
What is a black dandy? It's a central theme for this year's Met Gala, which is based off writer and professor Monica L. Miller's book, Slaves to Fashion, Black Dandyism and the Styling of Black Diasporic Identity. So when I heard news about the exhibit, I was definitely intrigued, but I was a tad concerned. How would people interpret this theme for the red carpet? That could be very problematic. Will the guest list align with the exhibition? And will the fashion industry actually empower black dandies? I do want to note that the dress code for the Met Gala, which marks the opening for this exhibit, is not black dandy. It's tailored for you, more broad, which is a nod to the exhibition's focus on menswear. But black dandy is a very nuanced subject that deals with race, class, stereotypes, etc., which is why I thought it was so important to bring together these three guests who have each contributed to the growth and evolution of the black dandy. First up, we have Dapper Dan, designer and consummate dandy, whose reinterpretation of luxury logos connected European brands to hip hop in a very influential way that we still feel today. Next up, we have June Ambrose, the iconic costume designer who helped elevate hip hop from a niche genre to a huge commercial entity through her styling. And lastly, we have Ali Richmond. You might know him as a noble savage, whose previous work as an A&R and current work as an artist, curator, collector, and brand consultant has quietly influenced how the industry taps into the black dandy ethos. So, we're gonna discuss a lot of things. The definition of black dandy, who is and isn't one, how each guest has contributed to the expansion of the black dandy, who the Costume Institute probably won't acknowledge, but should, and what is the significance of the black dandy today? And in our fashion sense segment, which I can't wait for y'all to see because a lot of y'all are confused, we are going to break down how the Met exactly works. It's a business and it's politics. My name is Aria Hughes, I am the editor-in-chief of Complex, and I'm asking Dapper Dan, June Ambrose, and Ali Richmond to please explain. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you all here to discuss the black dandy. What was your reaction when you heard that they would be honoring the black dandy? How did you feel about it?
I was wondering how tight of a definition they was gonna have. So it sent me straight to the library, and I said, are they talking about the classical sense of a dandy? Are they talking specifically about Beau Brummel? So I had to go and research Beau Brummel and see what his contribution was. Why is it dandyism? How did he start this? And what was his impact? So, and then I had to juxtapose that against what my perception of a dandy is, What I came up with for myself was I consider a dandy for me could be a moment, someone having a moment, or someone who is permanently dressed that way.
What about you, June?
I was like, wow, this is Anna Wintour's way of writing a love letter to Andre Leontali. And I thought, this is the perfect opportunity for her to celebrate not just Andre, but the contribution of black men in culture that's been supporting her brand and really supporting fashion in itself, and it's been influencing the fashion houses in modern day, I mean. Yes, there's a boatload of history for us to unpack. If we take it all the way back to the Byzantine days, even before, George Washington, really look at the regality and royalty of the West Indians and the Jamaicans who came over from, the Africans who contributed to dandyism as well. So there's so much, to unpack.
I love that Monica Miller is behind this. So it's like, okay, firstly, she's an expert, so and she's black, so that's important. But I was
she wrote the book on it.
She wrote the book on it, literally, and, So then it's like, okay, well, I would love to see Charlize Theron pull off this look. What? You know what I mean? Is it how are they going to interpret people that's not black? How are they going to interpret this?
We're going to talk about that later.
So it's interesting. But I guess at the end of the day, I'm glad it's happening. It's just unfortunate that it has to happen, if you understand what I'm saying. It's just, we're still other, we're still like, you know, Black is still a disclaimer to me, right? So, you know.
So let's talk about Black dandy and like the definition of it based off of Monica Miller's book, which I read most of it. So in her view, a Black dandy treats getting dressed as a discipline. They are known for wearing bold expressions of tailored fashion and refined style. They are inspired by European, African, and American origins, and they use clothes and identity to control the way they present themselves to the world and also challenge stereotypes or limiting beliefs the world has placed on them. It's not just about what you wear, and it isn't a trend.
What?
You did talk about
right.
Black being a disclaimer.
Yeah.
So what's
yeah.
your issue with Black dandy?
It's a disclaimer because it's like, oh, I have this artist or this stylist, or this is Black stylist, or this artist is a Black artist, or, oh yeah, I'm dating this person, they're Black. So it's almost like you expect less, you know what I mean? The expectation is lower. The person that's...
So you'd rather just be dandy and not the Black dandy?
Well, I'm all for Black, okay, 60s, 70s, self-identity. We're Black and proud. We're going from colored Negro to Black. But then when the 80s came in, how white folks started using Black, in my opinion, is different. It became kind of a negative description and a disclaimer. So at this point, it lowers the bar. Black movie, Black artist, Black this, Black this. So it depends on how it's used. Because a lot of people that are Black, that are, one would say are dandy, there's some people that say, yes, they're dandy. Dandy Wellington, you have the Black Willy Wonka, you know what I mean, legendary. You have different people, you know, Farnsworth Bentley, you could point out and say, okay, this person's a dandy. But then you have some Black men that, I don't know if Miles considered himself a dandy, but I love Miles and he's a perfect example. Because everybody, you know, and he was able to continue to grow and transcend and set trend styles. People are still chasing Miles to this day. You still have those Issey Miyake silhouettes from the 80s that he was doing, and it's like, we're wearing them now. So a lot of Black men that I learned from, a lot of my mentors, I don't know if they would consider themselves dandy, but they're definitely dandies from particular definitions, but I don't know if they would consider themselves dandy. So it's interesting.
And you don't consider yourself a dandy?
I don't like labels in general. Okay. I barely consider myself an artist. So I don't consider myself a dandy from the traditional sense in terms of being intentional, lifestyle, rebellious, this and setting your own rule, beat to your own drums. Dandies were also kind of eccentrics. Mm-hmm. And rebellious. I can relate to that, yes. But Du Bois wasn't a dandy. You know, he didn't consider himself a dandy, but some people would. So it depends.
He was offended by the word because of the sexuality that was associated with it. It was at early days I was reading
100%.
that they were offended, certain individuals were offended by being called a dandy because it was connected to homosexuality and
emasculation,
yes,
and also
yes. And
a coding to make you more not so rough. It's almost like digestible. Yeah. Like you have to look this way.
It was the emancipation of being inserted into society in a way that you were acceptable coming out of slavism.
Yes.
So coming from being a slave, this was your way of entering the space and becoming a person.
Yeah.
Being considered a real person and not a pet.
You're less of a threat.
Those are great points, and I'm glad she brought that up, because when you look at the purpose when Beau Brummel introduced this whole new concept of dandyism, that's what his purpose was, to move away from the Victorian way that they was dressing with their hair all pasted up and wearing corsets and all of that. So his main purpose was to rebel against that. That's why I'm so hard on the fact that we should have, I look at dandyism as rebellion. You know, because I see Beau Brummel as rebellion. I see all the categories that she wants us to address as rebellion. You know, so when I think of a Black dandy, I always think of it in terms of this is somebody who rebels automatically.
It's an insurrection, you know, in a sense, for the culture. It was their way of.
Yeah, but that wasn't the intention. Back to your point,
I'm sure.
Which is interesting. It wasn't the intention. It's like the whites could be rebellious, but for us, it was to assimilate. You see what I'm saying? And we had to find rebellion and revelry in that, because if you have a rebellious spirit.
That's interesting. I think we should, so in Monica's book, I read the definition, but in Monica's book, she talks about how basically, like you were saying, Black people were dressed a certain way during slavery because their white owners saw them as luxury goods, luxury items. So they dressed them a certain way. And then we have the macaroni. This was a blackface character that white people created in Britain. Then you move out of post-slavery, and yes, people start dressing this way to assimilate and also to escape, so they look as if they are free. And I think what she's saying, though, is that we're seeing both. Like you're saying, there's dandies that did it to assimilate, and then y'all are also saying there's dandies that did it to rebel and control their own narrative. Is that fair to say?
So going back to what you said, in terms of the assimilation part, that's why I said, yeah, you have some people to assimilate and they dress a certain way to get by and do a particular thing and be perceived a certain way, but they weren't really in it. It wasn't a lifestyle. They weren't studied. They didn't understand the tailoring to what Dap was saying. So I think that's the difference between what's going on. And that's what hip hop ushered in that whole thing, because you have a difference
Definitely an
between.
evolution of it all.
Right,
It's
100%.
been evolved in so many different ways. You look at artists like Busta Rhymes,
Yes.
who, really had dandy moments.
Well, that's a good point. Is Busta a dandy, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about some of the iconic music videos I worked with him on, there were moments of regality, there were moments of gender bending, sexuality that felt an ownership and eccentricity.
But is he a dandy? Because that's your vision.
But see, we've redefined as a culture what the definition of it means. When I would have conversations with young, Black men, in terms of as a costume designer and character developing, I would draw reference to certain nuances like dandyism, to talk about how important it is, the juxtaposition of how you carry yourself and where the shoulder sits and how your posture is going to make a difference in the interpretation of this garment, and really build and paint the picture of this character that they can become in order for them to really kind of own something that they're not normally used to, garbing and wearing, and reimagining it in a way that helps them to escape their own storyline and rewrite history in their own way.
Do you consider yourself a dandy?
You're damn right.
Yeah, right.
Of course, intentionally. I don't believe people get dressed by accident, as I told you before. We all get dressed intentionally. And I was bred to use fashion as a way to escape what was happening to me. You know what I mean? So yes, I had to be a dandy. I mean, the first outlet for me, coming from the poorest neighborhood in Harlem, was to transform myself physically, with clothes, And so all the guys I saw who was making it out, who was carrying the money, they were dandies. Even the guy who gave me the name, Dapper Dan, he was Dapper Dan. He gave me the name Dapper Dan, but I needed to know that I had to be that to escape where I was. It was an instant way that I can transform myself to be in a state where I could enjoy, the same amount of celebrity, and which entitle you to other things. I'm old enough to be her father. So when I was growing up in Harlem, you didn't even go to 125th Street if you wasn't dressed. You would be embarrassed. We didn't wear sneakers. You know what I'm saying? You carried your sneakers to the basketball court. If you saw somebody in Harlem, you go back and look at old footage. You saw somebody in Harlem with sneakers on. They was poor as hell. And that was an embarrassment. So each generation, things change, and the dandy changes with us. To be honest, when she first mentioned the macaroni, I heard the word macaroni. Those was the pimps in Harlem and the pimps around the country.
I mean,
oh really?
That's the Max.
I say, well,
macaroni, the Max.
I say, that's where I come from.
Oh yeah,
The
Max.
Max. For short. Mac for short.
That's crazy.
Mac for short. Yes. Mac for short.
That's a fun fact.
But I'm glad you brought
they
that
were
up.
the first dandies, if you want, the macaronis.
Well, the
and then when I was
peacocks, too.
reading what she was saying, she didn't spend a lot of time talking about the macaronis. Knowing about the pimps and how they considered themselves Mac men, you know what I'm saying, and where it came from.
Yeah.
So you really had three stages. You had the macaronis, who were very excessive in how they look, and you had the regular Victorian look, and then Bo Brummel comes along and just takes it even down a little more conservative.
And he wasn't tied to nobility or
Nobility or nothing
he was
like
able to infiltrate by the way that he
Well, that
dressed.
was a part of it. It wasn't even really an infiltration. They went to him. They used to go and watch him. Nobility would go watch him dress the same way when Thelonious Monk was ousted and he lost his cabaret card, people would go to his house and watch him play, but they'll go to his house and watch him dress. You know what I mean? What's interesting is you bringing up the Macs and the Pimps and, Harlem, because that's what it was. And that's all over the country. We have to look at the tie between the Pimps and the Preachers. So are they dandies as well? And are you a dandy?
No, I don't think I can own that title just because I don't have the discipline, for one, and I'm constantly reinterpreting a silhouette and stepping outside of the box of what a refined dandy and someone in a refined state of mind. Am I eccentric in the dandy sense of it all? To the average person, I would be considered an eccentric individual.
Right.
I don't take it as it's not offensive,
Well, can a woman be a dandy?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
I
Yes,
think so.
I say
I
yes.
think so. I mean,
Absolutely.
you think John Galliano's whole
Absolutely.
runway career is based off of dandyism and eccentricity and glamour and all of these kind of excursions as it relates to fashion and couture. So yeah, I mean, when I dress, in my mind, it's being coutoured and specifically for who I am, my body type, my emotion, what I want to convey, and how I want to make a climactic impact in the space.
But I think
and
your
a dandy
discipline is
also
your
knows when to leave the room.
right, absolutely.
They make an impact and they leave.
So you are.
So I guess I am a dandy. Look at that.
Because
I've discovered myself today.
your discipline.
Wait, I gotta go.
your discipline is your practice, though.
Yeah.
The most fascinating part of dandyism in terms of the female, let me paint the picture. First, when you think of a dandy, there's no way to exclude the zoot suit from this idea of a dandy, correct? So when there's no way to exclude this idea of classism and racism. So when the zoot suits came and we had the African dandies wearing the zoot suits, but then it took on even a higher form when the Mexican Americans adapted it.
Yeah.
So the zoot suits came out in the 1920s, 23, 24, but by the time the 1929 to the 40s, and the Mexican Americans started experiencing what we experiencing, and then they adapted the zoot suits, and then they became dandies. And then their females adapted it, and they called themselves pachuco and pachucas. That epitomizes everything you could think about when it comes to dandyism. You have racism involved, sexism involved, classism involved. So I think probably the pachucas, the Mexican American women, they were a vital force in what we term today dandyism.
I think this is a great segue to talk about the co-chairs. So the co-chairs are people who the Met brings on to help with planning and to just kind of be ambassadors for the theme. So this year the co-chairs are LeBron James, well, he's an honorary co-chair, Lewis Hamilton, Pharrell, A$AP Rocky, and Coleman Domingo. Who are your dream co-chairs, dead or alive? Like, who are the top 3 people in your
You mean
mind?
for this?
Angelina
For
Thomas would have been a
for this?
co-chair.
Who are the embodiment?
For this?
Yes.
Okay.
Of
this.
dandy.
Living or dead?
Living or
alive?
dead.
Oh, okay. That's easy.
Yeah. Who are your top 3 to 5?
Cab Calloway,
Yep.
Miles Davis,
Baldwin. Yeah, Baldwin.
James Baldwin.
Well, that's one of yours.
Yeah, that's
right?
one of mine.
Baldwin.
I'm just helping him out
Well,
because it's
Dap
tough.
is-
It's tough.
yeah.
Dap.
You could use
Dapper
you
Dan,
could use
Andre Lee.
Andre Leon Talley,
Yep.
for sure. So that's 3. How many you need?
That's good. June, what are your 3?
Listen, we're gonna share because this will go on.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking, but I think it's really nice to have this generation of young men and arbiters of the culture participate. It would be nice if we had some elders as alongside them. I know there was a lot of controversy around. I didn't even realize the chatter. That's when social media drives me nuts. But if they weren't involved, then we'd all have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Right? So it'd be interesting to see who gets a seat at the table. Because we all can't be co-chairs.
Yes.
We all know that the Met is a business.
Yes.
And it is also popular culture franchise.
Yeah.
You know, not taking anything away from what Anna Wintour has done in terms of her curation.
Yeah.
But it's a business, and Dap has had tables at the Met. He understands the politics behind it, so he could probably speak to it more so than I.
You heard that?
I have not had a seat at the
behind
table, but I recognize that.
What did you say?
I said I have not had a seat at the table, but doesn't make me any more or less relevant.
You worked
I
the runway,
understand my
though.
contribution. I have no bitterness in any one of my bones.
You say you haven't had a seat at the table at the
No,
Met.
but it doesn't.
Wait a minute.
You know,
Even though you worked the runway,
That part, the politics behind it,
it's
that part.
politics.
So let me break down how the Met Gala works, because I can tell a lot of y'all are confused by this. So the Met Gala is a charity event that helps raise money for the Costume Institute, which is a department within the Metropolitan Museum of Art that promotes fashion through the acquisition and preservation of historical works. It takes a lot of money to maintain a museum, you guys. So the Met Gala is the Costume Institute's main source of annual funding. Last year, for example, the Garden of Time themed gala raised more than $26 million for the Costume Institute. And sidebar, the Met Gala alone cost around $6 million to produce. So how do they raise this money? Expensive ass tickets. So the tickets to the gala cost around $75,000 per person, but not every person you see at the gala has paid for their own ticket. What usually happens is fashion brands will purchase 10-person tables, which start at around $350,000, and invite or host celebrity guests to sit at their table. In exchange, those guests usually wear designs from that brand. This is why many of you are so confused when celebrities don't wear the brands you think they should. There are restrictions based on who can afford a table at the Met. And for that reason, let's give a shout out to Lewis Hamilton, who in 2021 bought his own table to host Black designers and guests who typically can't afford a ticket. So why is Anna Wintour involved? Anna Wintour is Condé Nast's Chief Content Officer and Global Editorial Director at Vogue, who has been a Met trustee since 1999. She has a lot of control and power over the event. She influences the guest list, which is limited to around 600 or 700 people, and she even influences what certain celebrities wear. She's turned the Met Gala into a huge media moment and raised more than $223.5 million for the Costume Institute. That's how it works. That's why y'all don't see people wearing BB to the exhibit. That's how it works.
But no bitterness in my bones.
Yeah.
I'm actually excited, and I feel my contribution has been made, and I'm excited to see alive how that is interpreted. Whether I have to sit and watch it on my couch.
But you should be there. I just want to say that for the record.
especially at this one, at
Yeah.
least. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just saying, you've
well,
done the
thank you.
runway before, but at this one for sure. But who are your five?
Oh, are we back there? I gave some of my five.
Well, you go ahead, Ali.
You go.
Who are your
You go.
3 to 5?
Everyone Dap said, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna name some he didn't say.
Yeah.
Duke Ellington,
Ooh, see, your mind is working.
modern day Taz Arnold, Farnsworth, he deserves to be, you know, Andre 3000,
Oh,
you know,
yes,
from
yes,
keeping
yes.
it modern.
You're mixing it up like the elders, right? Like
Mix
you'd
it
be
up.
considered.
Okay, yeah, James Baldwin. I mean, you said James Baldwin.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Jeffrey Banks. I mean, Andre Walker. It's we could start really Willie Smith. You know what I mean? Patrick Kelly.
We're gonna
like-
talk about
But we-
designers
they
later.
made-
And it's very interesting because when I look at John Michelle, I look at him as a dandy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because he had the attitude and he was very intentional and consistent with how he dressed. I mean, I would even look at Janelle Monáe as I don't know if a chair, but you know, she's definitely a dandy. So it's
I mean,
yeah.
Andre
Well,
Harrell.
given the-
It's like Dr. Jekyll and
Andre
Mr. Hyde.
Harrell,
Yeah, we're gonna
absolutely.
talk about that.
Given the people that he mentioned and their styles, so that enables me to introduce, you know, because I feel like there's two type of dandies. There's the ascot dandy and there's the sweatsuit dandy.
Okay.
Well, no, this is a great point. No, this,
some
no.
of them guys he
This is a
mentioned on
great.
sweatsuit.
This is a great point. No. This is. He's not being disrespectful.
Yeah,
It's a great point
yeah.
because that's what hip hop ushered in.
Yeah.
A lot of what being a dandy is, or at least a black dandy, is recontextualization. And all of you all are familiar with doing that, making something your own. But it's also about regionality, which we've touched on a little bit already. But I want to talk about Harlem,
Okay.
because Harlem has quite a few stylish gentlemen, including yourself. And it's kind of known for style and fashion. And to our audience, they know Rocky, they know Ferg, Andre Harrell, who we're gonna speak about, James Baldwin, who we've talked about. Why do so many stylish people come from Harlem? Break it down for people.
Okay. For those of you who have not read my book,
I have.
there's a chapter I have, and I talk about boy wonders. Every generation in Harlem has what I called in the book a boy wonder. A boy wonder is the guy who everybody wants to be like, to dress like. Now, for all the people who saw Paid in Full, Alpo was the boy wonder for that generation. You know, everybody, even the rappers, they come there, yo, give me that Alpo outfit, give me that Alpo outfit. So they become the dandies for their generation. You know what I mean? And every generation had one of those.
But can we talk about the Harlem Renaissance? The influence of the Harlem Renaissance on like the sophistication of Harlem. Because when we were talking, you were like, I've traveled to many cities, and in my view, none are as sophisticated as Harlem and the way in which the men dress.
Well, you know, I looked up the history, and then Harlem had the largest, during the 1920s, Harlem had the largest black population in the country, number one. Two, it was the migration point for all the black intellectuals. And then that mixture of the Italians, the Irish, the Jews. I'm gonna do tours and show you where they was. All of those being in Harlem at the same time and exploiting Harlem. So when we had the Cotton Club originally was a club started by Jack Johnson until Mad Dog Madden, the Irish gangster from Harlem, you know, came to him and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And he took over the club and changed the name to the Cotton Club. You know, then we had Small's Paradise, Big Small's Paradise, Wilt Chamberlain owned, you know, and then we had Connie's Ballroom. We had all these great ballrooms in Harlem that, you know, and so that generated a lot more electricity.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about Ralph Lauren.
Oh,
I know
okay.
we mentioned him before, but I know, you know, me being from the East Coast, originally from Virginia, living in New York, you know, I have a very strong understanding of the lowlifes and their reinterpretation of Ralph Lauren. But we were talking about in LA, it was a whole different reinterpretation that was happening in parallel.
Well, okay, so the lowlives is Brooklyn.
Yes.
And that's their interpretation. And Ralph Lauren in New York was trendy for just like an average, you know, you're trendy, it's hot, you do it. That was Brooklyn. But, you know, there was a polo movement in Atlanta, well, in Florida for starters. Go look at the Doodoo Brown video. All they have on is polo. I mean, it's hot. So Miami, Atlanta, Philadelphia, especially DC, you know, this is 80s, mid 80s, New Balance, polo, Benetton. This is what was going on. Chicago, the Darians, Reggie No, Twilight Tone, Rob, all those guys in Chicago. However, in LA, we were not influenced at all by the lowlives.
Yeah, what was the difference?
We're influenced by skate culture, the beach, hip hop. It's LA, it's West Coast. We've mixed it up, but we were also influenced by people like David Arnold, who's Taz's father, who was just, I mean, Dandy. I bring him on the board. He really was my mentor in terms of dressing, him and Rodney Taylor, who was one of my friends. He was only 3 years older, but back then it was a big difference when you're in high school. But the point is, the difference was we were dandies, but we wore Ralph Lauren. So we were very serious and intentional on how we did it. It was very refined. You could have a logo, you might not have on a logo. It didn't really matter. And it was like we were taking it to the next level in terms of, okay, this is the box and this is what it was created for, but this is how we're pairing this and this is how we're styling it. Brooklyn, I love what they was doing. When I saw the pictures eventually and Reggie showing the scrapbooks and he met Thurston and they're trading pictures, I said, damn, this is literally a gang. You know, we were a smaller gang and we were doing what we were doing, but it was a clear difference based on influence, based on what we were fed. Like I said, whether it was the lowlives or Chicago or what they were doing in Atlanta, that's how Farnsworth Bentley worked at Ralph Lauren, you know. Whether it was that or DC, hip hop created that culture of Ralph Lauren, the P-Wing, the this, the this. It was called Stadium, we called it the P-Wing. You know, this stuff didn't exist. So much so to the point to where Ralph didn't address it. What Ralph did was gave us Tyson. You see what I'm saying? It's like, oh wow, this is interesting.
Tyson Beckford.
Right,
Yes.
Tyson Beckford. So they were very smart, and Naomi Campbell, you know, because she was, for the women in a lot of those. So he was very smart in that way. And then now, fast forward into the 2020s, we see James Dieter's the creative director.
Yes.
You know, and we see
Who's
what
Black.
he's doing with these Morehouse Spellman collaborations, which is brilliant. So it's very smart.
I hope these last chapters help you understand that being a Black dandy is far beyond wearing a suit or dressing well. It's a way to control one's narrative and in some cases rebel against stereotypes. It's also about studying and reading a book. In many ways, it's the embodiment of hip hop. Monica L. Miller's book does touch on artists like Pharrell Williams and Andre 3000, but it's far from a deep dive into hip hop's immense impact on the Black dandy. When I think about Black dandy, I think about the lowlifes and how their reinterpretation of Ralph Lauren spawned an entire subculture that helped sustain the brand. I think about drug dealers like Alpo, who Dapper Dan dressed, who set an aesthetic standard that influenced fashion in a huge way. I think about the late Andre Harrell, the founder of Uptown Records, who coined the term ghetto fabulous and brought aspiration and polish to hip hop. I think about the South and how folks like Farnsworth Bentley showcase a different side of preppy. In general, I think about recontextualization of things that weren't made for Black and brown people, but become even more resonant and significant when we touch them. So in these next chapters, we will talk about all of this and round things out by exploring what being a Black dandy means today and what power they are trying to obtain through dress. So let's talk about drug dealers and their impact on dandyism. I know you're well versed in this because drug dealers kept your business alive, yes?
My business off, though.
Yeah.
They was the only ones who could afford it.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's maybe talk about Frank Lucas specifically, and I know we've also talked about Bumpy Johnson. How do they impact dandyism to you?
They still impacted.
Yes.
Every rapper you see, all the jewelry, all the gravitational pull towards luxury brands, the rappers, Alpo and all of them young rappers that part of that generation, Jack Jackson, right? After Nicky Barnes came Jack Jackson. Jack Jackson used to be in my store all the time. Jack Jackson is the one who told on John Gotti's brother, Gene Gotti. You know, he used to be in the store all the time, right? The rappers couldn't come in the store while he was there. But when he left, they would come in, especially Alpo and that whole crew, and ask me what did they buy. And they wanted to dress like that.
So they were the key inspiration for how people wanted to dress.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Until today.
Yes.
It's just that they have more money now and they're leading instead of following.
Yes.
But you can still see the traits.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we're looking at this, right? From my understanding, Frank Lucas, that was a moment.
Yes.
And it was, I guess that turned the heat on him.
Yep.
I don't know if this is real or if it's fictitious.
Yeah.
And he hated that moment. But you mentioned Nicky Barnes. When you look at Nicky Barnes and he was on the cover of the New York Times magazine, that's who Nicky really was, from my understanding.
Yeah.
He was dressing like that every day when that was a moment for Frank Lucas. So it's almost like...
it was a big difference. Frank Lucas, if you ask anybody in Holland, Frank Lucas and them was called the country boys.
Okay.
Because they dressed country. You know, they got all, Ask anybody in Harlem. They was the country, they called the country boys.
When you say dress country, what do you mean?
Yeah, thank you.
What does that mean?
Different parts of the country have different ways of referring to other parts of the country.
Yes.
Because they said you were country too, right?
Exactly.
But they was like color-wise, coordination-wise, you know. Oh, here's a prime example. They were more like James Brown,
Okay.
you know, and we was more like Sammy Davis Jr.
Right, elegant.
Okay.
You understand? How does this reflect on the dandy?
Yes. How does it reflect on the dandy? Tell
Let
me.
me tell you, point blank,
Point blank.
young European boys started listening to hip hop.
Yes.
Okay? So when the young European boys started listening to hip hop, corporations, big corporations, start paying attention.
Yes.
That's why we have Tyson Beckford. You understand? They start paying attention. So once they start paying attention, money start going into music, right? So that enabled other cultural pots to evolve in other different genres. They don't care what the music is about, what they're saying, but they know that we need to drink. So now, to dandyism. When you create a musical genre that takes off, got the Europeans, got everybody, that takes off. Naturally, when the garment industry digs in, they're gonna be extrapolating from that. But we are still creating dandies. That's what I'm talking about. Every generation has a dandies, even with the A$AP Rocky is the dandy.
Yeah.
You know, Alpo is a dandy. But the music created that. You know, that sells. So the music is responsible for dandyism. The ballrooms, right?
Calling card.
The ballrooms back in the 20s, you know, the Savoy Manor and all the little places like that there, where they was jumping and dancing, brought about the zoot suit.
Yeah.
A reason and a season.
And all that created dandies.
Yeah.
So the input of the culture and where it's most powerful when it's followed locally, then nationally, then globally, you know, creates dandies.
Yeah. So you're saying
Full circle.
basically outsiders' interest in our music and hip hop helps more dandies proliferate?
Of course.
Yes.
Bingo.
Well, it takes it mainstream.
Yes. Yes. I want to talk to you about, speaking of dandies, I think Andre Harrell, would y'all call him a dandy?
Yeah, in fact,
Would Andre
let's be.
consider himself a dandy?
Andre Harrell, when he was a rapper first, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Which we're going to talk about.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr.
Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. And he only wore
they wore
suits. He was the
suits.
first
Yeah.
rapper that only wear suits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you, after your time in investment banking, went to Uptown Records as an intern. And I think, can you just talk about what you learned from him? Because like you all said, when he was in Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, he was wearing suits. He came up with the term ghetto fabulous. He also came up with the term champagne rap. So he was building this aspiration around hip hop that obviously was so tied to what people were wearing. So what did you learn or,
We had taken over a huge, iconic, you know, cultural mark, Motown
Yes.
Records.
Yeah.
And the history of Motown Records was glamorous and costumes and artist development was a thing. And Andre understood the assignment in terms of we have to develop our artists. We have to come up with narrative and storytelling. And he would look at me and he would go, he was like, you get it, you understand. And he was like, because I would walk in big glasses and very, you know, like I was like Edna or, you know, Edith Head, you know, it was like Edna from The Incredibles. Small package, big ideas and big emotion and big energy. And Andre enjoyed that. He enjoyed personality and persona, and he was entertained by people actually telling and living the glamorous life and full story. I personally told him I didn't think it was a compliment, the ghetto fabulous.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I was kind of taken back when I first heard it because I'm thinking, wow, I grew up in the Bronx. You know, I got an education, I made a living for myself. I was walking into the building what I thought to be fully evolved. And no matter what designer piece I had on, you still look at me and say, you're ghetto, but you're fabulous. So I didn't find it to be a compliment at all because in terms of, and now tying it full circle back to dandy, you know, being a dandy, you weren't getting dressed up for someone to remind you that you came from nothing.
Yeah.
You were getting dressed up to evolve from that stereotype. So that's why I thought the term was very pejorative and oxymoron in a sense, because the whole point of it all was for us to get dressed, to be seen and respected and elevate the perception of us, especially me as a young Black woman working in corporate America and then moving into a community of my own peers.
Yeah.
I would expect them to see me in a way that was inspiring. And I think it did. I didn't allow that to deter me from feeling like I was, you know, on the right track or still very confident and greater than. I still felt that. But I was lucky. Imagine if I didn't have that kind of confidence and chutzpah. I don't know if that would have sat the same way.
Let's go to the Jay-Z Sunshine Shiny Suit era.
So sorry.
Let's describe the shiny suit era for our audience. It was basically an era.
Yeah, it was
like,
a peacocking era.
Yes, a big peacocking era that, June, it seems like you influenced greatly. Your Caribbean background with the bright colors, shine, sexy, etc., glamour.
But also you think of, you know, hip hop, like alternative music, rock and roll was like dark, it was grungy. And I really wanted to create this dichotomy or this like, you know, just not be so, you know, rewrite the narrative and peacock in a sense.
Yeah.
And just be completely turn it upside down and commercialize it and create something that wasn't from the Great Depression.
Yeah.
But that looked very celebratory of life and joy.
Which is a offshoot of what Andre was doing.
Yeah.
But taken to another level.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. We talked, and
Yeah,
I already
we
told you
talked
he
about
had
this.
this question because obviously the Jay-Z Sunshine video, everybody's very familiar with. I like the video. I've actually talked to Jay-Z about this and Hype Williams.
And one thing, I know there was a lot of controversy. around the
Jay-Z
video.
said that the video was supposed to be something else, but
Yeah.
it turned into like a,
You know when Hype has a vision.
it turned into a smaller idea of what the bigger idea was.
The bigger ideas are always very expensive. We
Yes.
were obviously traveling to several different countries and had to narrow
Yes.
it down to one, New York and Brooklyn.
Yes. But Ali, you had a question. I'll go ahead and let you ask it.
Okay, so because before this was Mason Puff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was there pressure? Was this more your vision collaborative with Hype, or was it pressure from the label to like, no, we have to dress?
Oh.
You understand what I'm saying? Because sometimes that happens as well.
I don't even remember the label.
Especially during that era.
It was too early for the label to, you know, at that time the label would come and
Well, label
come
didn't even
people,
Dame,
but to,
you know,
oh,
whomever.
Dame wouldn't. I don't think he'd be happy about. I don't remember that part. I plead the fifth. But I think the label. I think the label. You know, when you have an artist like a Hype Williams, and the treatments were really blossoming, and they really were looking for direction on how to kind of commercialize hip hop.
Yes.
And make it popular culture. At the time, we just wanted MTV to play our
Yes.
stuff and VH1 to play our
Yes.
stuff because, and you know, you lived it. BET was really the only, and Video Music Box was where they were playing black music. And in order for the music to kind of cross over and grow into popular culture, so hip hop culture was born from treatments and directors with imagination and bold, non-apologetic, risk-taking moments like a Hype Williams. I remember, you know, and I've talked about this in many interviews, the choice of going for something that was matte leather, that felt like fire, and that would react to the lens and the camera and, you know, the cinematography, which as a costume designer, you think about all of those things. It's not just about fashion and style. And it was all about customization back then too. We were custom coutouring
'Cause you had no other
for the
choice.
genre. We didn't have a choice. And,
Yes.
you know, the ideas were here and you built according to it. And I just remember knowing that we were using a lens for the first time. The fisheye lens, Hype had brought that to the table and no one was doing fisheye lens. And then working with DPs that understood that certain fabrications could really create some kind of different nuances in this space. We just all went for it. We didn't have to ask for permission. No one was saying we couldn't do something. We just went for it.
But this was such a departure from what Jay-Z.
This
from
was
what-
this was
So
not Jay.
was he comfortable?
No, of course not. You know, no, but it was part of like the whole experience was doing things that made us uncomfortable as a culture, doing things that felt new and taking
Yeah.
those risks. And sometimes you would do them and say, you know what, that didn't feel good.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it again. But if we didn't try, then there was no growth.
Yeah.
It's my job to encourage you to feel uncomfortable
Yeah.
so that you can grow. And when you collaborate, that's part of the love connection. That's part of the session. The love session is doing things that feel like you're discovering each other for the first time. And the audience was really calling for it. The culture really, they were thirsty for that. I mean, it didn't start with us.
Yeah.
So, and you had African Boombada and you had all these artists and bands that were doing things that were very eccentric. This particular genre, I was putting guys in female frames and not telling them there were female frames. And also, you know, in hip hop culture, masculinity was a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We talked about that,
Sexuality
yeah.
was a thing.
Yeah.
And I was constantly dealing with that.
Yeah.
You know, so there
When
were
you
a
say
lot of
dealing with
layers.
that, you were constantly dealing with people who wanted to make
The
sure
fear.
that they
The
felt
fear.
like men. Yeah.
The fear of
Yeah.
being
Fear,
emasculated.
yeah. Even
Yeah.
having the culture of gay, you know, stylists and all of that, and working with hip hop.
And it's during the 90s, so it's a whole nother time. There's
You
no
know,
Instagram.
she
there's
deserves
no,
a whole lot of credit.
Yes.
Because
Absolutely.
She
Yes.
ushered in a whole new area.
For sure.
When you're dealing with rappers, you know, and now it's the transition. I'm ran underground,
Yep.
right? So I'm nowhere to be found. Only she could find me. Only certain people can find me, right? But now she's carrying the torch.
Yeah,
But
for
she's
sure.
between the rappers, right?
The label.
And the music companies. There's a lot of pressure.
And the audience.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a lot
The
of that.
audience
And
is
then
saying,
it-
that's not
If
hip hop.
she makes the wrong move,
Yeah,
if she makes the wrong move, then the rappers is mad as hell.
To Jay's credit, I mean, I have to say, for an artist of his
He trusts
caliber,
you.
and it's not even about me, the fact that he was willing to take the risk
Yes.
you got to take
Which
the
is-
risk.
and
Yeah.
thought about the impact and took the hits after.
Yeah.
You know, we took lots of hits. We do videos and people always had something to say, but it was
Yeah.
on a street level.
Yeah.
It was like a snipe campaign. It was like putting up a poster. It'll get covered. No,
no
but with
problem.
Instagram, it's the same
next thing.
cycle.
Same
Like, you know,
thing,
you
it's
keep
quick.
it moving. And you have to have tough skin. And you evolve and you're non-apologetic and you keep it moving. But the fact that he was willing, he said, I'll give you a shot. And he allowed us, you know, the creative freedom there. To his credit, that took a big man.
So this image is at Paris Fashion Week. We have Don C, Taz Arnold, your good friend, Kanye, Farnsworth, Bentley, and Virgil Abloh. And they are outside of Paris Fashion Week. They weren't invited to be there, but they got dressed and ended up getting in. When you see this picture, what do you think? And you have some intel.
Yeah, I mean, well, Don told a story recently. I mean, I call it personally, Niggas in Paris. To me, that was the precursor for the song that him and Jay did.
Is this
on Watch the
Dandy
Throne.
though?
Absolutely.
Yes.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a powerful picture. And I think this shifted hip hop and men in hip hop. It was very freeing. I mean, at the time, I think the younger people probably gravitated towards it. And then there was some fighting and resistance, I should say. But eventually this picture to me kind of opened the doors and really freed people up, you know. So yeah, that's super iconic.
So Pharrell is now the artistic director of men's at Louis Vuitton. Would y'all consider Pharrell a dandy?
Absolutely.
Yes, okay. Also, I want to note that Louis Vuitton is sponsoring this Met Gala. So that's another reason why Black Dandy, I'm sure, is the theme. Pharrell fits well into that. Okay, so Pharrell
And talked about openly about wanting to bring back tailoring and
yes,
suiting to the house.
exactly. So Pharrell is a dandy. Do you think, and we talked about rebellion being a part of being a dandy. Do we think that Pharrell's being rebellious at Louis Vuitton? And in general, his approach?
No,
No,
absolutely not.
I don't think so.
I think he's a continuation of what they started with Virgil.
Okay,
I don't see any departure from that.
got it.
I think sometime as black folks and as creatives, and I say this over and over again, we really, like Nina Simone said, she wanted to know how it feels to be free. You know what I mean? Put a little bit of sugar in a bowl. Even when we're in a position of power and we know the parameters, we know the rules, we're too afraid to break them or even kind of skirt the line, right? So it becomes really tricky because no matter how empowered we are in terms of position, we don't feel empowered.
Speaking of that freedom and younger generations, is Tyler the Creator a dandy?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you all see what he does he feel free?
Yes.
No, there's
Like, how do you feel when you see today the all over logo print that you basically invented?
all right. First, let me say this.
Go ahead.
Tyler the Creator is a dandy.
Yes.
Right? But what he's doing here is required of him.
do
So
you
it's
mean?
a slight twist from being a pure dandy.
Why do you
okay?
say that required of him?
Because that's a brand that he has to represent. So he has to be what the brand asks him to be.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I've been fortunate. The reason I've been fortunate, when the brands came to get me for the collaboration, they came to get me to do what I do. When they come to get other people,
Yeah.
they come to get them to do what they want done.
Got
That's
it.
the difference.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big difference.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've seen it, right, where sometimes even the brands will remind the person, no, go do your thing and be free and do your
Yeah.
thing, right? They want you to do this, where if you're the creative director, they'll say that, but it's just very,
There's
different.
guidelines
And
you need to
then
follow.
Tyler is this generation is much freer.
Yeah.
Pharrell is in our generation.
Yeah.
This generation is much freer
Yeah.
than when we were growing up in the
Gen
80s
Z.
and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There was no creative jobs back then. You didn't know, like, what? Go be a doctor, a lawyer, go join the service or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
this collaboration from what I understand, with Tyler, the Creator, and Louis Vuitton, came about from what Tyler had kind of bet on himself and had created his own, collection and community. And it was for Pharrell, it was a younger culture, a younger generation that he needed to continue to stay tapped into.
Yeah.
And Pharrell looks like he's still a young baby as well. But this audience that Tyler was able to speak to, Pharrell had to make sure that he was speaking to them too.
Yeah.
And that's why this happened.
Yeah.
And this is perfect.
So it wasn't about necessarily him doing what he was required to do. This was him getting an opportunity because he peacocked and did walk to the beat of his own drum. And because to me, when you meet and sit and talk to the kid, I got to meet him when I did Missy Elliott's concert tour this last year. And he came to the shows. And it was very interesting. He had no idea about Missy's contribution really, or my contribution, and was blown away. It was new to him.
Are you sure?
He absorbed the information.
Well, he didn't, yeah.
Okay, what's your counterpoint?
The counterpoint is this. We have to always go back to the beginning, right? Now, Gucci is the first one to expand on Logomania.
Yeah.
Right? That set the pace. Anybody who comes behind that and use logos in a way to gather an audience or to generate sales, you know what I'm saying? They're benefiting on what came first.
I saw you in the Genius doc having a conversation with Kanye. And it was only a clip, but in that clip, I heard you say, why your body language?
We had to bring that up. Go ahead.
But it's clear from that clip that you had a lot of foresight because you were giving him advice on to lean into fashion. Were you not? That's what you were telling him, right? Okay, can you talk about that a little bit? And is Kanye a dandy?
It's tricky. Definitely. He's an eccentric.
Yeah.
But he's a dandy because his heart is there and he's steady. You know what I mean? And it's intentional.
When you saw him, why did you say lean into fashion? Because you were an A&R at Raucous, and one image that we were gonna bring up, but we haven't, was Mos Def. And to me, in many ways, what y'all were doing was anti-shiny suit. Was it not? Yeah. So
listen. Sure.
Yes.
Listen. This got to
But my question for you is, why did you have this foresight to tell Kanye you should lean into fashion? And how do you think he's been able to use fashion to control his narrative, which is very dandy-like?
Oh, I mean, I'll just answer that question.
Okay, good.
When I wanted to sign Kanye, I couldn't meet him, right? Literally, it's like, G was like, no, you can't meet him because basically they didn't have him sign. So that's why Raucous didn't sign him, because it's like, okay, a couple things were happening. I can't meet him. What does he look like? Well, he's in the source, the first source. This is 2001. Look at it. I said, okay, he's different. He's from Chicago, cool. Take the source, take the demo, try to sign him, create a deal memo. They took that to Dame and they eventually signed him. But when I finally met Kanye 4 months after that, thinking he was signed, so I have to preference this because when I met him for the first time in the studio, I thought he was signed. I didn't want torturous interference, so I didn't want to talk about trying to sign him or anything. G's right there looking at me like, damn, why is this nigga here? You know what I mean? So anyway, talking to Ye, cool. Yeah, man, you believe in me, you tried to sign me, cool. Give me some advice. I told him, get your homeboys from Chicago. I didn't know John Monopoly at the time. I didn't know Don C. I didn't know any. I knew Reggie from the 90s, you know what I mean? I didn't know any of these people. Orlando, Brazil, right? Get your guys and get you an attorney. That's all I could tell you, right? And I think we exchanged phone numbers. So then the next time I saw him though,
yes,
he looked different.
Okay.
On that Genius, that was like 2002. This was maybe like 6 months because the summertime, after I met him for the first time, the fall of 2001, he had on a big shirt, he had on a fitted, he had on baggy jeans. And I was like, nah, from my experience, what I saw in the magazine, what I saw a few months ago, this is not true. Yeah. That 2-minute clip on Jeans was a 15-minute conversation. So I was like, focus on art, be an artist, tap into high fashion, do this. Basically, go back to your true identity and your authentic self. because you're trying to fit into this Rockefeller mode that's not authentically you.
Yeah.
You're not going to make it and stand out. This is also musically and aesthetically, you got to go back to yourself because this is what's missing. So that was the advice. Like I said, it was a 15-minute conversation.
Yeah.
And the one thing about Kanye, he took every single thing and he did everything and the execution was excellent. The rest is history.
I want to talk about what true power is, because a lot of what being a dandy is about, or a Black dandy is about, is like taking something and making it your own. And I think it's really beautiful that the Met is honoring that. But there's this unspoken thing that, do Black people have true power in fashion, is the question, outside of influence and outside of pushing product. So that's what I want to have a conversation about. And I actually think that can segue nicely into Jay-Z, because he obviously has this history of wearing Iceberg, making it incredibly popular, Iceberg rejecting him, then him launching Rockaware, then him moving into the button-up, which I know that you have had a lot to do with. And we see, he loves a suit. Okay, is Jay-Z a dandy?
In my opinion, he is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dapper Dan?
He's fine and dandy. Yeah.
Do you think Jay-Z's a dandy?
There's categories of dandies.
Why don't you ask me real quick?
Yeah.
Before we're up the camera. I think Jay has evolved.
Yes, exactly.
He
He wasn't
evolved.
from inception.
Yeah.
Sure.
He's evolved.
Absolutely.
Yes.
He
For
wasn't
sure.
from inception. I think when he's in his suit persona, we reference, understand, and relate to dandyism.
Yes. Yeah, because
And I think when he's in his workwear, chill, it's a separate persona. Does he live the lifestyle of a dandy? No, but he understands how important fit is, how important construction, the little nuances, the buttonholes on the functional sleeve. He understands all the nuances and has the education of fine tailoring and wearing a suit.
See, I would say Jay's evolved into the lifestyle of a dandy, actually, because he's into art, he's into this, he's into that. So he's evolved into the lifestyle of the dandy. Look at his hair.
Yes.
It's all to me.
But he's not flashy.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
He's, but he has
There's
ways
different
of being
categories.
brazen.
Well, Bo Brummel,
Yeah.
the thing with Bo Brummel was to tone it down anyway.
Yeah.
That's right.
Different categories.
So, but he fits two main parts of what a dandy is based on Monica. His gestures, number one, and his wit, number two, because he be coming out with some really powerful statements, And then the dressing part is there as well. So he got three of the main components which constitutes a dandy according to Monica.
He's also dictated a lot in terms of how other Black men might wear a suit or take off the jersey and wear a fitted.
I'd like to think so. No, I think he's a major influence.
Yes, for sure.
And that's why he's been such a great collaborator and partner in us really upholding and curating and understanding culturally how important our contribution is, right? It's like these little things. I just remember you started to see the dress on the streets. When I think if you pay attention, the consumer tells you what they are gravitating towards, what they believe is relatable and tangible. And when you start to see young men, and this was a process. It wasn't like a change clothes superhero moment.
Yeah.
It was a slow, natural progression. And it felt authentic and organic because it was done in a way that was very authentic to who he is.
Yes.
So, and also understanding the consumer, understanding the customer, they know authentic was the most important
for
thing.
sure. Yeah.
And I think just seeing just the juxtaposition of a button-down shirt with jeans, taking out of context, and slowly growing into the businessman, showed that he meant businessman.
Yes.
I think that is what made it all so tangible to the consumer.
Yes.
It's the way we went about it.
Yeah.
Is what made sense.
But I want to expand on this thing. When it comes to power, you want to know, where's the power? Do we have power?
Well, because in the past, obviously everyone has different interpretations of dandy, and people use it in different ways. Some people use it to assimilate. Some people use it to rebel. But I think in general, people are trying to control their narrative in some type of way. So my question is, do Black people have control in fashion? I think we have shown that we influence culture, and we have faces like Pharrell who are at these big positions within fashion brands. And you've started Fashion for All in 2016, so I'm sure you're privy to lots of conversations that are had behind the scenes. But it's like, what is the dandy? What is getting dressed and being a dandy? What are we trying to achieve now? Do we have power? Does a lot of people can see this whole
world domination
thing as pageantry and not true power? But go ahead.
So real quick, you mentioned Fashion for All.
Yeah.
I'm the co-founder, Hannah
Yes.
Stoudemire, other founder. When we started Fashion for All, I realized we don't have power.
Yeah.
At all in fashion.
Yeah.
Right. So to answer your question, absolutely no.
Yeah.
The power we have is with our dollar.
Yes.
That's the power.
Yeah.
That's what I was
power
going
we have
That's
is with
what I
our
was going
dollar.
to say.
With how much we spend.
Yeah.
How we spend
And where we spend
it at. The power we have is with our dollar, but no, we don't have power in fashion because we're not distributing, we're not manufacturing, we're not. So that's the power. So, you know, however, the power we do have, which is actually greater than distribution and manufacturing, is with our dollar because we can shut you down. I remember when Gucci had their faux pas and I'm talking to Dap and I said, nah, Dap, people like, you know, there's a murmur, Dap should leave, Dap should leave. This is in the middle of your collaboration. I talked to Dap, I said, no, you don't leave, don't go anywhere because when you was underground and all this stuff was happening, nobody was there. If the community pulled together, all these people saying you should leave and gave you a $25 million check to start your new brand, then that's when you leave. But outside of that, no, don't leave at all. You know, we have power, we don't realize it.
Yeah.
Because we're like this as a people,
Yeah.
right? The minute we come together, then we'll realize our power and we can start from scratch today.
Yeah.
But until then, actual power, no, we don't have it literally right now today in fashion. However, we can have it overnight if we stop spending.
Yes. My take on that is this. Our power lies in our ability to empower influencers. You see, influencers is the ones who are the movers and shakers to what the masses want. The masses empower the influencers. Let me tell you a case in point, right? Fat Joe called up to me like, yo, Dap, man, fix this thing. I can't wear my Gucci. What does that say to you? In other words, the people are not going to be happy. The people that empowered him, that made him the rapper he was, will be upset with him, so he can't wear. 50 Cent said he burned his Gucci, you know what I'm saying? And all that. But when you look at, if it wasn't for social media, what could gather all this power together, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
Because so I'm sitting here because of the power of the masses, right?
The black masses.
Being able to shake up the industry, right? And making the rappers saying, yeah, y'all got to do right by Dapper Dan. You understand what I'm saying? So the power lies in our ability to create influences that cater to what we need to have.
Yeah.
The power lies in our ability to unify.
Yes, yes.
We unify behind Dap. That's a very direct thing. There it is.
In June, I don't want to harp on it but it's just like, it kind of frustrates me that you haven't been to the Met, and I know, I think you don't care, or maybe it does sting a little bit, but whatever, but it's ridiculous that we're having a celebration of the Black Dandy and you have contributed to the evolution of Black men and how they dress and how they present themselves to the world, and obviously how these brands make money, whether they know it or not, and you wouldn't be involved in some type of way. So I'm asking, like, as of today, how do you feel about our place in fashion?
Well, thank you for that. And like I said, there's no bitter bone in my body. I am completely at peace and understand the nuances and the politics and how the business works of the Met. And a lot of people don't understand. They just think that, you should be invited because you've contributed. But there's so many, and like I said, Dap knows because he attended and he knows what that involved. And it's a fundraiser, So if anything, not being invited, I would look to people like a Pharrell and my peers at this point. That I've worked with throughout my career, early in their career, and influenced, and I would look to them to rewrite that. It's not my job. is not to ask, is not for me to ask. And if the invitation doesn't come, I still am excited to see it happen. I think that we have a lot of work to still be done. And I think when you talk about the economics and our buying power and our influence, and yeah, we are extremely powerful as a consumer, that we can squeeze you. We can also confuse you too. You know, a lot of fashion houses jumped onto cultural things that we created and not fully understanding it and not bringing us on board to participate in how it's delivered to the marketplace and had fumbles. You know, we've seen big fashion houses get into problems because they didn't collaborate with people of true influence that influence some of their designs and their marketing. And when you build a community that's not honest, you end up getting into trouble.
Yes.
So I like to work with like-minded people who see me. I don't want to have to convince you. I want you to do your homework like I've done mine.
Yep.
I'm a student. And anyone of power and anyone in power, they should do their research and they should figure out who actually should be in a room or who should participate or who, it's not my job to figure out.
Yeah.
It's my job to continue to make an impact, continue to stay true to myself and my contribution, protect the culture, grow it, evolve it, be dandy while doing it.
Yes.
And I'm okay with that.
I think that's a beautiful place to end. You know, we've had such a robust discussion around what a dandy is, and I feel like from speaking to all three of you separately and together, to me, the most important thing that I want to impart to the audience, that it's so much more than what you're wearing. And it's about study and reverence and discipline and reading a book. So I just want to thank you all for coming and having such great insights and really helping us explore this idea of Black dandy and all the many things that it means. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you.